East African Breweries, which is owned by Diageo, saying that it's going to buy the final 20% stake in Kenya Breweries from SCB Miller. This dependent on Ebel selling its 20% stake in Tanzania Breweries. Now, this deal means that Kenya Breweries will stop brewing and distributing SCB Miller's product in the local market. Tanzania Breweries also ceasing to promote Diageo's product in that market. This was a cross-border deal that was agreed to between the two rivals in 2002. How's the market taken to the fact that they're disentangling from each other and becoming more independent of each other in the region?
Well, I think the deal is more or less being seen as a parting of ways between the two rivals. And as you mentioned, it was entered into in 2002 when South African breweries decided to pull out. Now, according to recent reports, Submiller is actually trying to make a comeback to the local market, and I think that would have presented issues if they continue to hold shareholding in Kenya breweries. So I think it more or less implies that that they're probably going to be going after each other in terms of market share. So it would be interesting to see how it plays out. But by and large, I think the market still remains quite bullish about EABL, given their high market share in the Kenyan market and also their growth strategy around the region. So we'll probably know how the whole thing unfolds in the months ahead. But today, at least on a positive note, the EABL stock went up, albeit marginally.
And those two stocks also going up in other bourses that they listed in. So clearly investors are taking a like to that news. Now, just looking at another key event of the week is, of course, the budget, which is going to be announced on Wednesday. Now, the Finance Minister, Uhuru, having a tough task ahead of him. Growth forecast to slow to 4.2% this year. That's from last year's rate of growth of 5.6%. He needs to protect growth whilst taming inflation. There is news that bulk of the budget is going to be going towards infrastructure projects and construction projects. How's the market taken to this news that construction is going to be the priority area this year?
Well, I think generally speaking, the market is actually looking up at the budget, and there's a lot of anticipation in as much as the increase in spending in the development side is concerned, especially given the emphasis and focus on areas like infrastructure, looking at areas like roads, electricity generation, a switch basically from thermal generation to more cost-friendly methods like hydro and more essentially geothermal sources. I think by and large, when the market looks at this information, it basically implies a reduction in the so-called cost of doing business, where energy has been playing a key role, and also in terms of having a more efficient roads network. But perhaps the other thing that the market will be looking at, and investors for that matter, is the issue of absorption. We've seen in the last budget about 143 billion shillings was returned to Treasury because the line ministries were unable to spend this money by the end of the budget year. So I think in as much as the development side of the budget is going up, the market would still remain apprehensive until they see a firm commitment in terms of government's ability to absorb these funds.
Of course, as you say, those ministries not spending their full budget that they were allocated, and this year the budget going up by 500 million shillings. Sorry, I couldn't get that out. Let's just move on to funding of the 1.15 trillion shilling budget. How much leeway does the Finance Minister have to raise taxes, given the fact that tax revenues that have already come in have been sluggish?
Well, I think looking at it from the current state of the economy, you have slowing demand. You have some of the companies that are announcing their earnings are basically coming up with the lower numbers than last year. There's a general indication that given where inflation is, consumer demand is still very, very weak. So I think raising taxes perhaps would not be ideal in the current economic situation, especially if he hopes to attain the strong growth numbers that had been projected earlier. So I think most of the space that he has might probably be on the borrowing side. Taxes, some might go up, but probably the bulk of his financing will come from increased borrowing.
Increased borrowing on the local or international market, given the fact that local yields have spiked since that interest rate hike?
Mainly on the local market. I think he's already received about 52 billion shillings in terms of external grants and loans from development partners and other agencies, which I think should give him some leeway. But I think the bulk of the borrowing will basically be in the domestic market, which you probably anticipate to be somewhere around 200 to 250 billion net.